To start off, I'd like to give everyone an introduction about Burnaby Neighborhood Watch. We are a grassroots organization founded in 2023 to give Burnaby residents a voice. All of our volunteers live in the city of Burnaby, and we're here to raise awareness and concerns on major infrastructure projects. 5389 Imperial Street is currently being proposed, a 5 to 6 story site with approximately 40 supportive housing studio units, as well as 10 complex care studio homes. This is what the government is proposing without proper input from the community, as well as proper consultations with the community. So this is what we're discussing today, and why many refer to this project as a drug house. You can see on the housing continuum, we have a spectrum from homelessness all the way to market housing. Emergency shelter is for people who are in urgent need of temporary care. They may get a shared space where they can spend the night, or some of the better shelters actually provide them with a suite with their own sink, perhaps their own toilet, etc. The transitional housing, right? And that's when people actually transition from homelessness to a place they can stay, at least for the time being. Another step up would be supportive housing, and another level to supportive housing would be called complex care housing. Now, supportive housing is used to house homeless individuals, sometimes people with mental health issues. And what's really alarming for us is people with addiction problems. They're provided 3 meals a day, they're provided housing. But what else is alarming is the projects are typically wet model, which means within the facilities, they're allowed to use drugs. It's the people going there, they're not going for treatment necessarily. They may want help to transition, but it's never really, they're authorized or they're allowed to use their drugs. In Richmond, you see, needles, glass pipes around the area, which didn't exist previously, right? And CCH is really designed for people with addiction and mental health issues, individuals requiring more intensive care. Some of these people, they're not actually able to take care of themselves. They require 24/7 staffing and medical supports. And just like supportive housing, the vast majority are wet models as well, and they allow drug use on site, and they're not really monitored. They provide what's called a safe supply, and there are drug addicts in there. They get a quote unquote safe supply that they can take to help with their addictions. Sometimes the drugs can get funneled through to the public. When there are safe supplies going around, more often than not, they trickle into the community as well. I'm sure a lot of us can understand what affordable housing is. It's for low to middle income residents. Actually, right within the vicinity of Burnaby South again, there is affordable housing for seniors right around the corner. The picture here is a proposed emergency shelter. It's going to be built on the Gilmore diversion. It used to be the site of the BD headquarters, which have moved offices, and they've sold this building to BC Housing themselves. So without any zoning requirements, they could go ahead and change this into their shelter. But the official definition of the BC government is, it's temporary, but immediately places to stay for anyone who is homeless or at risk of homelessness. It serves as a short-term transition for residents who are in need of it. No screening are required. Usually anyone can stay. And these sites are usually in public areas, so it's extremely mobile. The person that comes tonight might not come tomorrow. And most of the shelters allow drug use, except for dry shelters. And there's frequent visitor turnover. There's very poor visitor management. And it does put the neighborhood at stress as well. Now let's talk about supportive housing. The official definition of the BC government is that supportive housing is subsidized housing with on-site supports for single adults, seniors, and people with disabilities at risk of or experiencing homelessness. These supports help people find and maintain stable housing. Yeah, supportive housing sounds good because you're helping people. You're helping single adults, people in need, seniors, and people with disabilities, right? They may be experiencing or at risk of experiencing homelessness. What's really concerning for all of us is most of these are wet models, usually with a safe consumption room, right? And the residents are allowed to use drugs on their own. And these residents cannot be subject to compulsory drug rehabilitation. It's low barrier. Anyone who applies pretty much gets in, and this would just put a roof over their heads while they consume drugs. And Burnaby currently has 2 operating supportive housing facilities. And here's a picture of it right here. This is Norland and Ledger. They are supportive housing sites in Burnaby right now. As you can see, it's right next to the Trans-Canada Highway. And you have here Canada Way, right? Right across the street, you have, around this area, we found a tent right next door. We have a church. We have a union building next door. But surprisingly, they decided to open it next to Smilestone's junior kindergarten and preschool, right? Not too far away, you have other industrial sites. You have City Hall. You have, City of Burnaby Engineering. You have the RCMP right around the area, right? And this green box would be the new RCMP detachment and fire hall, right? So if things do get out of hand, support is nearby. Now that we've talked about supportive housing, let's talk about complex care housing. This would be a step up from traditional supportive housing, which has already caused problems in places like Coquitlam and Richmond. It serves individuals with complex needs involving both mental health and addiction, which is a high-risk group. Complex care housing is neither a hospital nor a drug rehabilitation center. It's not a rehab center, and it does not provide compulsory drug rehab. So they require 24/7 staff to actually look after them. Again, they're provided meals and they're provided, quote unquote, a safe supply of drugs. And residents are allowed to openly use drugs, right? The drugs that the government provides to them, but as well the drugs that they can get on their own, right? But what they don't say is it's close to at least 4 elementary schools within walking distance. They don't say it's 800 meters away from Burnaby South Secondary School. They don't say it's very close to Kingsway and Royal Oak, which has been a business corridor for a very long time. More transparency is needed. I'm sure most of you actually agree with me. But at the same time, they seem to want to do things their own way without input from the public community, which we all believe at Burnaby Neighborhood Watch is something we should all fight for. What is affordable housing? The official definition of the BC government is they consider affordable housing if it costs more than 30% of household income before taxes. So it serves really low-income communities, low-income families, the elderly, youth, and working families. There are no drug-related services. To get into affordable housing, you need to be eligible. You need to provide your income, your background. You need to show them that you're in need, you're trying, or you're working, you're raising a family, and you qualify for this type of housing. Again, affordable housing, it has a higher community acceptance than with less drug-related issues. And what we don't want is we don't want needles on park benches. We don't want a 5-year-old potentially picking up a needle. We don't want someone high on drugs attacking us while we go to the grocery store. We don't want increased break-ins or having our bike stolen just because we parked it on the side of the road. Okay. And I think I mentioned wet model a few times. There is a difference. For wet model housing, residents are not required to be abstinent from alcohol or other drugs to live in this housing project. Residents are fully allowed to use drugs in their rooms or in safe consumption places. Sometimes they use a jet lighter to light their glass pipes. And, once the drugs kick in, they might pass out. And this is what caused a lot of the fires on Granville Street and in other supportive housing buildings, right? I've spoken to someone who worked in ER, and they said same night, 3 times they got the same. They had to go see the same person, or it was either the same night or same week. And that ER person just said enough is enough, and they actually resigned after that type of situation, right? So you're not required to get off the drugs. We can help you, and we can get you off the streets. We can even give you safe supply drugs, but you're not required to go sober or even attempt to going sober, right? And residents are not subject to compulsory drug rehab, and harm reduction supplies are provided, aka clean syringes, naloxone, maybe glass pipes as well. And most BC housing, supportive, and CCH sites are wet model, right? So this is why the community calls it a drug house, because in fact, every single wet model project, the residents would have access not only to their own drugs, but also a safe supply provided by the government at its current state. And what would be a dry model? Well, we don't see very many of them, but a dry model, the residents there must remain drug-free. Generally speaking, more than a 60-day abstinence before they're actually admitted. It would be more suitable for seniors, people with disabilities, and those with stable mental health conditions. And the first dry model supportive housing project was at Victoria Johnson Manor. So why is the wet model often called the drug house? Drug house, we don't use this term as a discriminatory verbiage, but it's based on experience and the reality of current policy. Nationwide homelessness survey in Canada found that 14% had only drug use problems, 47% had both mental health and drug problems. That means approximately 61% of homeless people have some form of drug use problem. A large-scale study of homeless people by the University of California, San Francisco, USSC, found that only about 25% of homeless people have never, ever used drugs. Now, what really are our concerns? On paper, we can all agree that drug use spills over to the streets. Again, this site is only 800 meters away from Burnaby South Secondary School. We had a situation in Surrey where a 14-year-old girl bought fentanyl for $5 or $10. A 14-year-old girl who's maybe never taken hard drugs tries fentanyl and she dies. And we want to do whatever we can to prevent this type of situation from happening when we can prevent it, which is now. From looking at cases in Richmond and studying some evidence, we know that although it may be a single room occupancy, usually you're able to invite friends over. We don't know who actually goes in there, right? Maybe it could be a friend of theirs. Maybe it could be the drug dealers themselves. There's a rise in crime and harassment to the local residents. It also affects nearby businesses. People have had their bikes stolen. People have had their parkades broken into. This is something we want to try to avoid at all costs. And there's also increased safety risks for surrounding schools and traffic, right? There's too many negative examples of wet model that I could share today, but we may not have the time. And there's almost no successful cases of patients coming out, right? So these concerns are not about discrimination against a vulnerable group, but rather about the significant loopholes in existing policies. If someone goes into these buildings, they get a free roof over their heads, they get 3 meals a day, they get free access to safe supply drugs, and they have a place where they can shoot up or smoke up all they want. Are they ever going to leave? Supportive housing and complex care housing is meant as a transitionary stage. But if you're a resident there, you're not paying anything, you're living in one of the best neighborhoods in Metro Vancouver, are you ever going to leave? Right? Who would give up a free lunch? And in the meanwhile, our community is the one that suffers from crime, from drug use, from all sorts of things, from not enough resources. On the flip side, though, we did find out about the project very quickly. Approximately 14,000 people have signed an online petition on change.org. And so far, we've collected about 10,000 signatures in writing on paper petitions. So I really like to thank our volunteers going door to door to businesses, to residents, to schools, raising awareness and telling people what 5389 Imperial Street is all about. And BC Housing is very sneaky with this because they could say, oh, we've tried to talk to the community, but no one actually came back to us. All right, so very quickly, we mobilized and put together a press conference. And we did so in front of BC Housing's headquarters. That was what we might have considered our first protest. On the same day, BC Housing announced that they didn't want any public hearing, right? And so with this information, many of us gathered in front of City Hall. At the peak, there were about 1,000 people, and we appreciate everyone raising their concerns, raising their voices, signing our petitions, and doing whatever we possibly can as residents of Burnaby to voice our concerns. Until we see some concrete changes, more is going to come. Some updates since I made the PowerPoint slide on December 24th, BC Housing actually changed their timeline. Previously, they wanted to launch the house by 2028. But now, because we've made our voices heard, they've taken that timeline away altogether. And the senior source within the city of Burnaby actually said that we're very early. We are being heard, right? So keep writing to the city councilors, keep writing to the mayor, keep writing to BC Housing and our local MLAs. But these are some sources where we took to put this PowerPoint together today. It's all Googleable, but if you'd like, you can definitely take a screenshot or visit these sites if needed. We oppose the wet model supportive housing and complex care housing project at 5389 Imperial Street. We're not against the people who actually need help. With that, I'd like to thank everyone for spending their evening with me today. If there are any questions, please feel free to message it and voice it in the chat box.